So, the Great War, the war to end all wars, finally ends in November 1918. It only cost about 20 million lives, shattered 4 empires, and introduced the world to the joys of industrial-scale slaughter. As a fun bonus, the Spanish flu was busy killing another 15 million people, just to make sure everyone was having a terrible time. Into this global tire fire walks American President Woodrow Wilson, a former professor who carried himself with the serene confidence of a man who has never had to work a day of retail in his life. He arrives in Europe with his 14 points, a list of high-minded ideals like free trade, open diplomacy, and self-determination for all nations. It was a beautiful, noble plan for a world populated by reasonable people, which was unfortunate because he was about to enter a room with politicians. The main event was the Paris Peace Conference, which was less a conference and more a 6-month-long argument held in a very fancy building. Running the show were the Big Four. You had Wilson, the idealist, then there was David Lloyd George of Britain, a political chameleon whose main goal was to make sure the British Empire came out of this looking good and that Germany could still afford to buy British goods. And then there was Georges Clemenceau of France. They called him the Tiger, and he had seen his country invaded by Germany twice in his lifetime. His goal was simple: to cripple Germany so thoroughly that it couldn't threaten France again for 1,000 years. When someone mentioned Wilson's 14 points, he famously grumbled that God himself only needed 10. Oh, and there was also Vittorio Orlando from Italy, who was mostly there to get a slice of Austria-Hungary and was largely ignored, which went about as well as you'd expect for Italian politics in the next 2 decades. Wilson's big idea was national self-determination, which is a lovely concept where people get to decide their own government. The problem is, when you try to apply that to Europe, a continent with 1,000 years of overlapping ethnic groups, you realize you're trying to unscramble an omelet with a sledgehammer. The result was a map-drawing party with all the foresight of a 5-year-old with a crayon. They created Czechoslovakia, a country of Czechs and Slovaks that also had millions of angry Germans, Poles, and Hungarians. They carved a Polish corridor out of Germany to give Poland sea access, which also conveniently cut Germany into 2 separate pieces. Brilliant! They stitched together the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, later called Yugoslavia, because forcing a bunch of historically rivalrous groups into one country had always worked so well in the past. Every new border they drew seemed to create a new angry minority group on the wrong side of it. The main event, of course, was the Treaty of Versailles, aimed squarely at Germany. First, they made Germany sign Article 231, the War Guilt Clause. This was the legal and moral foundation for everything else, basically forcing Germany to admit the entire war was 100% its fault. No nuance allowed. Then came the bill. The Reparations Commission eventually set the price at 132 billion gold marks, a sum so astronomically large that economists at the time, like John Maynard Keynes, pointed out that Germany could not possibly pay it. He literally wrote a book called The Economic Consequences of the Peace, warning them this would wreck the global economy. They ignored him. Finally, they disarmed Germany. The army was capped at 100,000 men, with no tanks, no air force, and a navy that was basically a handful of fishing boats. It wasn't just about peace, it was about total, permanent humiliation. And lest you think they only picked on Germany, don't worry, they had enough vengeance to go around. The other Central Powers got their own special treaties, each one a masterclass in kicking an empire when it's down. The Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye dismantled the Austro-Hungarian Empire, leaving Austria as a tiny, landlocked German-speaking republic forbidden from ever uniting with Germany. Then there was the Treaty of Trianon for Hungary. This was arguably the most brutal of all. Hungary lost over 72% of its territory and 2/3 of its population. Millions of ethnic Hungarians suddenly woke up and found themselves living in Romania, Czechoslovakia, or Yugoslavia. And the Treaty of Sèvres did to the Ottoman Empire what a lawnmower does to a dandelion, carving it up into pieces that were handed over to Britain and France as mandates. These new, completely arbitrary borders in the Middle East have caused absolutely no problem since. None at all. Back in Germany, the reaction to the treaty, which they called the Diktat, the dictated peace, was pure, unadulterated fury. They had been promised a peace based on Wilson's 14 points, and instead got a bill for everything wrong with the world. This humiliation birthed the infamous stab in the back myth. The idea was that the German army hadn't been defeated on the battlefield, it had been betrayed by weak-willed politicians and revolutionaries at home. A convenient lie that would prove disastrously popular. As a final, defiant gesture, on June 21, 1919, the German fleet that had been interned at the British naval base of Scapa Flow scuttled itself. German sailors deliberately sank 52 of their own ships rather than hand them over. It was a pointless act of pride that perfectly captured the mood. If we're going down, we're taking our toys with us. The one thing Wilson did get was his beloved League of Nations, an international body designed to prevent future wars through diplomacy. He had sacrificed nearly all his other points to make it a reality. It was his baby, the centerpiece of the New World Order. There was just one tiny, insignificant, monumentally stupid problem. When Wilson got back home, the U.S. Senate, led by his rival Henry Cabot Lodge, refused to ratify the treaty. America, the country that had championed the League, refused to join it. It's like building your dream house and then deciding to live in the shed out back. The world's most powerful nation, the one with the economic muscle to actually enforce the League's decisions, decided to sit on the sidelines. The League of Nations was born an orphan, and it spent the next 20 years proving just how ineffective an organization can be without any real power. So, what did the Paris Peace Conference achieve? It officially ended one war while providing an excellent step-by-step instruction manual for starting the next one. It created a mountain of resentment, a web of unpayable debts, and a series of new, unstable nations with built-in ethnic conflicts. The French Marshal Ferdinand Foch, who was no peacenik, looked at the treaty and said, "This is not a peace. It is an armistice for 20 years. He was off by about 65 days. The desire for vengeance, the clash of egos, and the complete failure to imagine the consequences of their actions created a peace so fragile it was doomed from the start. It's a classic example of humans winning a conflict and then comprehensively losing the aftermath, which, if you study history, seems to be one of our most consistent talents. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!